Hey everybody, this is Cameron from Obnoxious and Anonymous, and welcome to another chapter review for Mark Frost's book, The Final Dossier. My guest today is George. How's it going?
Hey Cameron, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
It's great having you here. Today we are going to be discussing the Ben and Audrey Horne chapter. Bum bum bum. This is, I know for a lot of people, this was the chapter that people wanted to read. What happened to Audrey? We need to know. Somehow I think you have a different idea about that.
Well, no, I mean, oh no, I do enjoy Audrey as a character, and this was a interesting elaboration on what happened to her, and I like that it was kind of about Ben and Audrey because I think when those two characters are, I mean, they obviously, both actors have really great chemistry, and the character dynamic was always one of my favorite ones.
I always love the moment in season one where, she is, and Sherilyn did such a great job with the scene where she's walking that line between being sincere with her dad and also trying to play him to get that job at the perfume counter where she says, "Please let me be your daughter again."
Yeah, it's kind of genuine and disingenuous at the same time, but
right.
Yeah, that's
it works perfectly both ways.
Yeah,
Richard Beamer, Sherilyn Fenn, when they work together, I love that moment in episode 14 where she's kind of just hanging out in that long plaid shirt, and she just says, "Did you kill her?" And he just looks at the picture and he goes, "I loved her."
Oh man,
chills
every time.
And it's like, without saying no, he's like he's saying yes and no at the same. It's so beautiful.
Perfect.
And the music is absolutely gorgeous. But anyway, yeah. So we're gonna talk about this chapter, the Ben and Audrey Horne one. Again, this all these case files are put together by Tamara or Tamra or Tammy, however you want to say it. Preston, case number 119 again, which I absolutely adore. I love the fact that I've said this before, but I love the idea that Mark Frost took this 119 idea, and even though it doesn't explain the 119 lady, it just touches it enough that makes you go, "Oh, isn't that a cool little coincidence?"
Yeah, totally.
It's almost like she's in the series just screaming that, like, as a warning, right? 119, like, get ready. Stuff is about to go down here. All right, so let's discuss this. This chapter, I think, is wonderful. And I also think that this is one of the main chapters why Lynch did not want this information out prior to the series, because this chapter puts everything in so much context that there wouldn't be a lot of mystery to the Audrey Charlie scenes if we had this information prior to the series. That being said, I think that this chapter would have quieted the naysayers of the Audrey Charlie scenes if they had had this context prior. Don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely would have lessened the mystery a little bit. I mean, I absolutely love that moment at the end of part 16 where it all just kind of flips. Obviously, with the dance, and that was really good throwback to original series, but just that shock of where she is, that's like,
but it's also the white with the sound of electricity and all that. It's and then it obviously cuts to the Audrey theme being played backwards. It's perfect. But yeah, this chapter puts so much of their story in context that I can see Lynch's idea that this would ruin part of the mystery of it. And yet, I think for a lot of people, it would have helped the context a little bit more. All right, so let's get into it. She mentions, first of all, that that Ben and Sylvia Horne have divorced, and divorced within 2 years of the revelations, after the revelations of what had happened with the Haywards. The fact that that Donna was indeed the daughter of him and Eileen. It seemed like that tryst that they had years ago just destroyed both families. If you go by this book,
so tragic
with both half sisters ending up in private care facilities, and maybe 3 if you count Gersten, right?
That's true.
So it says that Audrey Horne obviously survived the bank explosion, but obviously this didn't lead to her and her dad getting along throughout the years. It says that Sylvia, her mom, moved across town to a mansion, and Ben stayed at the Great Northern. Well, that explains a lot, doesn't it?
That's why he's always in the office. Probably sleeps there.
Well, it says in the book that a lot of times he would just sleep in the office. I mean, he did have a private room, but it said that he rarely slept there. He mostly slept in the office. Jerry, of course, had an entire wing of the hotel to himself, which is quite funny. But when Richard goes to, attack his grandmother, Sylvia, we see this different house. And I remember thinking in the series, this doesn't look like a house that Ben goes home to every night.
Yeah.
Right. So that puts that into context. Also, the fact that Sylvia, took Johnny with her. And so obviously we've seen the series, so we know that. But I just love hearing how characters got to where they are.
Oh, yeah. No, me too. And I mean, definitely connects a lot more dots. I mean, a lot of the things in this chapter, I, for the most part, kind of interpreted, with myself from just seeing the series. But it's really nice to kind of, with Frost having to kind of just fill in a little bit of the blanks, throw in a little bit, of all those kind of missing areas or the kind of questionable areas, and just kind of, it's still pretty mysterious though. It's not like it's like expository,
No, what he's doing is he's giving context.
Yeah.
And so, okay, this is the part that I love. That Audrey wakes up from her coma, and after 3.5 weeks, she has no memory of the event. But she remembers, prior to that. So when she gets home and realizes that the thing that she was protesting against, the Ghostwood estate, and that her dad did go through with it. And that caused a huge rift between her and him, which is interesting that she would feel that strongly about it, that she would let it, destroy her relationship with her father, because her protesting of it kind of, I wouldn't say it came out of nowhere, but it's kind of introduced in the final couple episodes. It's not like she's an activist through the whole series.
Yeah. It's definitely a side of Audrey we've never really seen before. It didn't feel so out of place, but it was just kind of a sudden development.
Right. But obviously she gets out of her coma and she's like, oh my God, my dad did this. This really ticks me off. And then it says that Audrey discovered 2 months after her release from the hospital that she was pregnant. Then it goes on to say that Audrey refused all help, financial help from her father and mother, moved out of the family home, got her own apartment, and she figured that she was going to be just raising this kid on her own as a single mother. Richard was born when Audrey was only 19. She got her GED through independent study, took some community classes at the college, opened up a hair and beauty salon, and it was a successful one. But she pretty much kept to herself. She had, just a few friends. She had obviously her customers. And then it says she never commented publicly. It was never heard to speculate with anyone about who the father might be. Tamara says that obviously she could have gotten a paternity test and maybe found out how, but she didn't want to do that. But then she concludes by saying, the only possible clue I've been able to find along these lines is a framed photo of Agent Cooper that hangs on the wall of her office. Now, I don't think that Audrey Horne, this is how I read it. I don't think Audrey Horne is putting up his picture because she thinks that's the dad of her.
Yeah.
Of Richard, I mean. I think that she puts the picture up as a reminder of who she strives to be, strives to be like, to make Agent Cooper proud of her. Because I don't think in her mind she thinks that Agent Cooper is somebody who would sneak into her hospital room, have his way with her, and then never talk to her again. I think that she probably believes, because she's only had sex in her mind one time, that the dad is John Joseph Wheeler.
Yeah.
It has to be.
Yeah.
Because why would she revere Agent Cooper, a man that supposedly did this to her and just left?
Yeah.
That's just the feeling I get. Obviously, there's no mention of John Justice Wheeler, but there's no mention of anybody being the dad.
Yeah.
So that's how I read it. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of the same way, because, I mean, obviously she was unconscious. I mean, you know, they allude to it, that, you know, Mr. C, doppelganger, you know, definitely probably took advantage. But I kind of find it as a tribute to Cooper, of her having his photograph, because she does strive to be like him, and she was in awe and admired him, you know, throughout the, you know, first 2 seasons. And even though their relationship didn't go in the way she wanted to, she still had much, you know, a major amount of respect for Cooper. And so that would make sense that he would, you know, that she would have a photo of him. And also adds to when Richard confronts Mr. C outside the convenience store, that he saw his photo in her office. So
exactly, and he didn't know him as being the dad, but as being an FBI agent.
Yeah, totally.
So that again speaks volumes there. Tamara goes on to say that Audrey has never allowed Richard to meet his grandfather, which is that's interesting, you know, because now when you think back on that scene of Ben talking to Sheriff Frank Truman, it is interesting, right? Because I mean, throughout the whole series, we kept saying, I know some people were saying, "Where's Audrey?" I kept saying, "Why isn't anybody mentioning Audrey?"
Yeah.
I mean, we had Will Hayward mention her, but anytime the Horns were around, Audrey never was brought up. And I found that so interesting. Well, this chapter puts all that into perspective as to why they don't even mention her name. I would have loved if Frank, who's not part of the family, had mentioned her name in that meeting with Ben, said, like, have you talked to his mother after the, you know, this accident that happened where he ran over the child? That would have been great, because then Ben could have said, I haven't talked to his mother in years. But I think, you know, Lynch wanted this feeling of not knowing what happened to Audrey. So he probably took out, if there was a line in there, he probably took that out. But I do think that the sheriff not asking Ben about Richard's mother, who was a prominent member in the Twin Peaks community, is sort of the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Right? That's just the way I look at it.
Yeah, I also kind of took it like that maybe she's so far removed from the picture, and maybe, you know, it could have been like a touchy subject for to even bring up to Ben as well. I mean, that's kind of how I kind of took it, was the lack of mentioning Audrey besides Doc Hayward. Everyone's kind of just, I mean, Sylvia didn't say anything, Ben doesn't say anything, Frank doesn't say anything. So it's just kind of like, you know, she definitely seems like she would be far removed, which seems to be the case. So
then it goes on saying, when Richard Horne turned 10, Audrey married her longtime accountant. It's interesting that they don't bring up his name, but let's assume it's Charlie.
It's got to be Charlie. I mean.
Right. But I find it interesting that, you know, Mark Frost is so detail oriented that when he leaves details out, I'm like, that's an interesting choice there. Says that this was more of a marriage of financial convenience than affection. All right. That makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
I like this part where it says, I'm coming across troubling accounts of public scenes, heavy drinking, verbal abuse, and sexual infidelity, all allegedly on the wife's part. Okay, that completely syncs up to what we saw in the series.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Then it says, 4 years ago, without warning, Audrey closed the salon. Not long after, she seemed to vanish from public life. troubling rumors suggest a private care facility. The Horne family spokesperson has refused to respond to all inquiries regarding her whereabouts. Now, here's what I love. Okay, so if you go by that, let's say she is in a private care facility, which is something that Sherilyn Fenn has told people.
Yeah.
Well, this matches up. But what I love so much about that hard cut of in the white room that we talked about, right, is it manages to merge everything into one moment in literally like 8 seconds of gloriousness. And that is, she's in a private care facility, right? Supposedly, right? She, we're like, all the stuff with her and Charlie was stuff that she was kind of like going through her life in her head, right? Yeah. Talking about all the stuff, you know, the infidelities and showing her just being living a hard life. Obviously bringing back the Audrey's dance thing. The mirror recalls like a hair salon mirror. And then the electricity in the air is reminding us of the idea that Mr. C had his way with her and created Richard Horne. And then with her music playing backwards, it just gives you a feeling of unease. So even if she's in a private care facility, the fact that they managed to merge past, you know, the supernatural, her hair salon, the, you know, in almost like 5, 6, 7 seconds of like horror.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I can't believe that Lynch was able to do that much with honestly so little.
Oh yeah, no, it definitely spoke volumes. And yeah, I also kind of wonder if these were things that were maybe originally in the original script that they wrote, but maybe because I know Mark Frost, the Austin Film Festival, was saying stuff about her running a hair salon, and that was kind of nixed in the show for something, I guess, more interesting. So I kind of wonder if that was.
Here's what I think happened. I think they had some of this story in there, right? But instead of showing her downfall and then maybe put into a private care facility, Lynch just put her in that place and then made everything else recreations in her head, but taken from her previous life.
Yeah. No,
so he just kind of shifted things around. So it's the same material, just presented in a different way.
Oh yeah, totally.
So that's fine with me. Again, though, people had heard about this prior. It would have ruined a little bit of what's going on.
Yeah.
But it also would have made people patient with what was going on too.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, for a while I was a little whatever about the Audrey stuff, but it kind of grew on me after a while, and I was more intrigued to see where it was going.
So then Tamara gets into Ben talking about what we had spoken about previously, that he spends the majority of his time at the Great Northern. He keeps a private suite, but he mostly just sleeps in his office. He's basically a workaholic. And he is forever haunted. The fact that Ghostwood came between him and his daughter. I love that. I love the fact that Ben Horne did not revert to his seedy criminal ways, that he continued to strive to be a good person, and he thought he was doing the right thing with the Ghostwood development, and then it backfired on him and he lost everybody. You know, his infidelities lost him, his wife, his family. Audrey just took off and you know, has been writing you know, 1 or 2 letters with Donna, you know, that connection there. So I mean, it's truly fascinating stuff here. But the biggest news of this section is that they built a prison, the Ghostwood Correctional Facility.
Yeah.
And when it opened, Warden Murphy was running it.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I love that mention.
Now I've heard from some people saying that they didn't like that development. How are you on that?
I think it's great. I mean, even Warren Murphy, as little as he was in this, he had some intriguing stuff going around with Mr. Strawberry and all that. And I think the fact that he was involved in the prison in Ghostwood. I think it's a nice little connection. You know, I don't think it's. I mean, I definitely enjoy
and people like that. You know, that run big, you know, establishments like that do often go from one establishment to another establishment. So it's not like out of the realm of possibility. And let's be honest here, if Jerry Horne can run across a couple states, then Warden Murphy can work at one prison and then work at another.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting coincidence, and you know, I mean, I'm not sure if that has anything to do with Ray getting imprisoned to his facility or Mr. C using leverage against him, but I think it's a nice little tidbit, nice little extra thing, and I really like Warren Murphy and James Marshall, who played not James Marshall, James something, I forget his full name, but he's been in some pretty good stuff, and I definitely enjoyed his character for what he was, and I really like that little addition. So I don't understand why anyone would be all up in arms about it, but
maybe they feel like, you know, everything doesn't have to always be connected. But I didn't feel like this was, you know, an extraneous thing to do. It was, you know, it's just a nice little Easter egg tidbit for everybody. But you know, this book is filled with just chapters that make me just so happy, and this is one of them. I mean, even though it's a tragic, sad story, it completely just makes you understand and feel for Audrey and Ben, who are yearning to communicate, yearning to you know, make amends, and yet their ideals and who they are as people just won't allow a Horne member to apologize. You know, and you know, you have Audrey, she's so defiant and going her own way, and you have Ben, who's so obstinate and going his own way, and and that rift, you know, is probably going to destroy the Horne legacy moving forward.
Yeah, it is really sad. Even when I read this chapter, I mean, I definitely was empathetic towards Ben through this new series. So even now, it's like, wow. And I thought it was so great that his choices in the end of season 2 still kind of gained consequences for the last 25 years. So this wasn't like another one of Ben Horne's mistakes. It actually had consequences, and I think I think he needed to base those serious consequences to kind of evolve as a character. And I just think his, you know, whole thing through the original series to season 3 to the book, I just think it's a really great character growth. Very memorable. Yeah,
and I love the idea that, like, this is all information that is coming from the book, right? None of this is in the show itself.
Yeah.
And yet, the way Richard Beamer and Sherilyn Fenn play their roles, by now knowing this information, they were able to communicate that performance from this information, right? Like even if I don't know if they knew about this, you know, before they were shooting their scenes, or whether they just saw the scenes and played it out a certain way, and then Mark Frost kind of is giving us this backstory now, or whether Mark Frost gave them this backstory prior to shooting, I don't know. That being said, this information is in their performances, so it's not like you know, Mark Frost does Tamara Preston and David Lynch does Tammy Preston. It's not two different interpretations. What I'm reading in this chapter is what Ben and Audrey are like now, based off this information. So I don't know how they did it, but the actors did an incredible job. Whether they had this material, then they did a great job. If they didn't have this material and just kind of read through the lines, then they are truly some of the most extraordinary actors who ever graced the screen, that they were able to communicate all this information without having this information.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think this is a great chapter, and I think it's a much needed chapter for a lot of people. It gives people a lot of closure, at least in terms of how the characters got from where we saw them in season 2 to where they are in the new series. So I think it was just a job well done.
No, me too. It's definitely one of many great chapters in this book. There's really, I mean, for me, there's really not a dull moment in this book, but this is definitely one of the highlights. Definitely brings some more context with Ben and Audrey, and I just think it was very well put together.
So. Yes, some people have commented on the fact that the book is so short, but I'm okay with that because it's all killer and no filler.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, great page after great page. It just keeps it hits all the marks. And
I haven't read a bad chapter yet.
No, I mean, I've read through the whole book, and I really have no complaints. I couldn't put it down. I spent like 2 to 3 hours reading the whole thing, and it was just.
And I think that's the best part about it is the fact that you can sit down and read the whole book in an afternoon.
Oh yeah, totally. That's really good.
So, all right, guys. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. We will be back with another chapter in the near future. And in the meantime, thank you so much for liking these videos and sharing them. And make sure to let us know what you think about this chapter in the comments below. We will see you next time. Take it easy.